Hello and welcome to this special edition of Political Capital, the show where Delhi meets Dalal Street. Joining me now is one of the sharpest financial minds in the BJP and a core member of its economic team, Jayant Sinha, Member of Parliament from Hazaribagh and Director at the India Foundation, a think tank that Prime Minister Narendra Modi listens to very closely. Thank you very much, Jayant. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I remember back in March when I spoke to you before that grand victory of your party, you told me people's aspirations and expectations are sky high right now. Even if we were to form the government and come up with the right policies to be able to match those very elevated expectations in a rapid way is also going to be a challenge. Do you believe that the burden of expectations is somehow way too large at this point of time?
No, I don't think that the burden of expectations is too large, Vivek, and of course it's a delight and a pleasure to be with you again and to chat with you and your viewers on all of these issues. It is certainly something that we think about, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out exactly how we are going to meet those expectations. And I think what you saw with the railway budget today was an attempt in that direction, because whether it's the railway budget or whether it's the general budget that will be coming up shortly, we are going to have to walk a high wire act. It's going to be a balancing act that we're going to have to walk, because on the one hand, sadly, the country is in a bit of an economic ditch. And we are facing all kinds of very challenging economic circumstances. And on the other hand, of course, we have to be true to our election campaign, and we have to really be able to match the aspirations that you spoke about right now. So it is a high wire act, it is a balancing act, and we have to find a way on a policy perspective to be able to pull that off.
Is the big balancing act, Jayant, also the fact that while the big global investors, and I've spoken to a lot of them, and I'm sure you speak to them very often as well, they want to see that bitter pill being taken. They want to see your Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, walking that talk and giving that bitter pill. But on the other hand, you have a situation where on a sentiment basis, and you brought up the point about the railway budget, look how the market reacted to it. Do you think that is the balancing act, that where the big money is, they want the government, they're willing to give the government time? That's the sense I get when I speak to the global fund managers, at least. They don't expect a magic wand and to clean things up quickly. But as far as the citizens are concerned, and the social media that you all believe in very strongly, that just jumps on to every decision which is not necessarily in the near term very good, but perhaps in the medium to long term a very good decision.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, we live in a fast twitch world. People are quick to come up with their reactions, particularly on social media, and it ends up being somewhat viral sometimes, and it builds on itself. So obviously one has to take that into account. I think as far as the investors are concerned, and like you, I speak to many of them, both domestic investors as well as global investors, I think they recognize the numbers are what they are. And the numbers are not going to improve in the next 3 months, 6 months. It will take time to be able to pull the car out of the ditch and really turn the numbers around. But I think what they're really looking for, and in that sense, it's actually very possible to get an alignment between what people are expecting and what investors are expecting, is that they're looking for the intent. They're looking for the roadmap. They're saying, what is it that you're going to do right now that will really enable us to put the economy back on a fast growth trajectory? And that, by the way, is exactly what people are looking at as well. Now, in the meanwhile, of course, as far as price rise is concerned and inflationary spikes are concerned and so on, we really have to make sure that we are on top of things, and so that things don't get out of hand with respect to the political response and what people are saying. But I think in terms of the intent, in terms of being able to show that we are taking concrete action on things like bullet trains, for instance, I think that's where people are willing to see what the policy roadmap is and really bet on that.
Jayant, the big question really is all about where is the money going to come from, isn't it? The Prime Minister, shortly after taking office, has been on a few occasions, and one of it in Goa was a very straight from the heart kind of a comment, saying, I know that people may even not love me for some time because of the bitter medicine that I've got to give. And other senior leaders of this government have been saying, or trying to temper down expectations, or coming out and saying how things are really bad, the coffers are empty. Is the big question really going to be about how is the money going to come in terms of putting together the vision that is there in your manifesto?
That's a very good question, Vivek. The coffers indeed are empty, and as you know, the fiscal deficit is said to be 4.1%, and that was what was presented in the interim budget. But we know that the actual real fiscal deficit is higher than that because of the sleight of hand that Finance Minister Chidambaram did. In fact, the actual real budget that an economist will say is probably significantly higher than 4.1%, probably even 4.7, 4.8%. So that's really the situation we are looking at right now. The coffers are empty, and so you have to demonstrate fiscal prudence. You can't do mindless populism. That is the grim reality that we face. However, and this is the good news for all of us, the good news is that in fact there is a wall of money that is willing to invest behind good projects. And some of that money is domestic because we have plenty of savings yet. Unfortunately, some of them have been going into real estate and into gold, but there's a lot of money domestically, and internationally there's just a tremendous amount of money. And I think if we are able to show that we have the right projects, that we can in fact secure high quality dollar returns for investors because the rupee is stable, because we have a good predictable tax regime, then I think we'll find that the money will come flooding in, and that then in effect becomes the way in which we can start to turn the economy around, even though the government's coffers are empty. And we saw that again in the railway budget today, because the railway minister said that we will look to FDI, we will look to PPPs to get some of these new projects going for the railways.
Let me ask you this question more wearing your hat as a director of the India Foundation, as someone, Jayant, who has so many years of experience both domestically as well as globally. Let me ask you this, and I'm putting this caveat because I understand that you may not be able to say the same in your capacity as a member of parliament and a member of your party, but what would your own expectation be? What would you want this budget speech to contain?
I think the budget speech is going to follow in a way the same framework that the railway budget has demonstrated, which is fiscal prudence, not mindless populism, a balancing act between making sure that we are going to have the financial resources to do what a responsible government should do, while at the same time identifying the projects, identifying the initiatives that set a new direction for the economy and really demonstrate that we are here to deliver convenience, facilities, amenities for passengers, improve quality of life for them. So again, we've got to really be fiscally prudent while at the same time identifying those projects, identifying those ways in which we can really create a new direction for the economy. Again, we saw that in the railway budget. We talked about bullet trains, we talked about conveniences for passengers, we talked about safety and security. These are all bold new initiatives, and of course we will free up the resources either through PPP, FDI, or by being prudent in terms of how we manage the network to be able to pay for all of that.
From a global investor's point of view, Jayant, who probably take a more medium to a long-term view, there have been several issues which have bothered them. You and I have spoken about them the last time we talked. On that front, would you expect the government to be coming out in a far more bold manner? For example, retrospectivity, put an end to it. There's no point saying we won't do it in future, but that's what your manifesto says. But why not just repeal it? Why not put an end to it? DTC, GAR, just look at it altogether afresh.
Well, I think that the finance minister has already indicated that as far as taxation is concerned, that our government is going to consider it very carefully. There have been enough indications on GST and retroactive taxation that we will move forward in a way that's very investor and business friendly. So those indications are certainly there right now. I think at the same time, Vivek, the reality is that if you look around the world, and this is one of those things that in some ways we in India don't fully appreciate, that if you look around the world and you see what is going to unfold in India over the next 10 years with a stable BJP government, it's one of the most exciting growth stories that's out there. You know, people would rather invest in India than in many of the other emerging market countries. And we have an opportunity here in India to take the economy from $2 trillion to $5 trillion over the next 10 or 12 years. And if we do create, you know, that much amount of growth, $3 trillion, we'll have to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure. We're going to have to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in consumer-oriented products and services. And I think market cap itself, which is, you know, typically 1:1 with GDP and is about $2 trillion right now, market cap in India could go up to $5 trillion, $4 to $5 trillion. So the wealth creation, the investment returns, what's possible for both domestic and global investors over the next 10 or 12 years is one of the most staggeringly interesting and profound growth stories that exists in the global economy right now. So I think what happens is that, you know, investors that think longer term recognize that opportunity. I've just recently been in conversations with folks who manage hundreds of billions of dollars in global funds. I've been in conversations recently with some of the largest domestic investors, and that's what they are seeing, and that's what they're excited about.
What did these people tell you, Jayant, in terms of what they expect from this budget?
As I said earlier, Vivek, really people understand the numbers are what they are, and that you know, in a few days that we've had, the 40 or 45 days that we've had as far as the government is concerned, it's really not possible to do much with the numbers. You know, the economy is like a battleship. It's an aircraft carrier. You can't turn it around easily. So we'll have to nudge it and move it along, and that's how the numbers will begin to turn and change. On the other hand, you know, what people are really looking at is the policy intent. What do you want to do with taxation? What do you want to do in terms of, you know, pro-market reforms? Are you saying that India is open for business? How are you going to manage inflation? What is your relationship going to be with RBI, for instance? Is RBI going to be able to maintain stable rates? Those are the longer-term factors and issues that people are interested in. And so far, you know, what they've heard from the government, I think the railway budget as well, demonstrates that this is a responsible government, that this government understands the very difficult challenges that we face, the fact that we have to create jobs, that we have to meet the aspirations of a young India, and that we are going about it in a serious and in a thoughtful manner. And I think that's what gives them confidence. They will expect to see more of that in the budget, while at the same time, and this is what I told them, and they again understand fully well because they understand India well, is that the budget is one step in a long process. And that we are going to be continuing to do things, we're going to be continuing to take bold actions, important policy steps that will continue to really make India a terrific investment destination and a great place to do business. And that really is what reassures them.
That's a very important point you're making, Jayant, because sometimes one tends to give too much of a weightage to the budget here in India, isn't it? Because there are a lot of reforms which are not part of the budget and which could continue on a daily basis. But yet, therefore, what you're saying is, what you on your part are telling global investors and domestic investors is that it's not just about the budget. Reform is a continuous process. Is that correct?
No, that's exactly right, and we see that on a daily basis. For instance, in the last few days, there have been news reports about UID and Aadhaar and how, you know, the government intends to use it for direct benefits transfer to be able to reduce leakage and subsidies and so on. Now, that's a very important step forward. That's a very important reform measure. That's not necessarily reflected in the budget discussion as such. But, you know, I know for a fact, and I can reassure you and I can reassure investors and business people on that, is that every day the government comes to work. Every day the government is looking to make India a better place to do business and to be able to meet the aspirations of our people. So, we are at it continuously and we are very much driven by the national interest, and, we will keep on pushing on all of these efforts.
Do they also ask you a lot about GST, Jayant? Because that for many years has been that one elusive big reform measure. What is your own sense? It's a very complex piece of legislation, but do you believe that from whatever you know, or from whatever, we can only go by what we've read, but maybe you have a slightly more different, incisive knowledge about things and the way they're going right now. Do you believe that that's a reality in the near future?
I think all the indications suggest that the government really wants to move forward on GST. It is a very complex sort of set of measures and revenue reallocation between the center and the states, which is why it's taken so long to get to the point where it can be implemented. There are still some aspects of it, such as the revenues that will come from, I think, petroleum products that are being worked out. So it is a tricky piece of legislation. Obviously, there are a lot of implementation issues and so on. But I sense very much, whether it's from the center or from the states, that there is a desire to get it implemented and to work through all the complications associated with that. And I think, once we put GST in place, it will give a real boost to growth, and I think it will really be able to have at least 50 basis points, if not 100 basis point type boost to GDP growth once it's fully implemented.
Jayant, again, coming to conversations one has had with the big global as well as domestic investors, a couple of points emerge out of those conversations. One is, look, we don't expect the fiscal deficit to be 4.1. We're okay if it's 4.3 or 4.5 or whatever is that number. What we are more keen on is a transparent disclosure of that number, point one. And point two, we want to see the government spending on certain things. For example, education, infrastructure. So we don't want a government which is coming recklessly and cutting expenditure completely. Is that something that you and your colleagues have been able to convey to the government?
No, I think that's very much front and center in the way that the government is thinking about the overall fiscal situation. Clearly, the fiscal deficit is going to be challenging, right? And exactly how the numbers are going to be dealt with will have to wait for Thursday when the actual projections are announced. So we will have to see. Clearly, Mr. Chidambaram did a number of things to either suppress expenditure or to exaggerate revenues, which has resulted obviously in a situation in this quarter where we already have consumed up 45 or 46% of the fiscal deficit. So we really do have to address and deal with those realities. All that being said, you're exactly right. If indeed we do make investments above and beyond which was in the interim budget, and those are into productive capacities, whether they are human capital or its infrastructure, I think people will recognize that it's required if indeed we want to push as far as growth is concerned. The reality, Vivek, is when you study the numbers, that so much of government spending and government expenditure is essentially out of your hands, right? I mean, you've got very large interest costs that you're bearing, you've got defense expenditures, you've got a number of subsidies, some of which are quite difficult to touch, and they are baked in. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the amount of discretionary resources that you have are somewhat limited. And so how you actually use those discretionary resources, whether you go beyond what was in the interim budget to what kinds of capacities that you put them into, those are the places where the actual intent of the government and its pro-growth agenda will manifest itself. And I think you should be reassured, others should be reassured about this, because if you look at what was done in the railway budget, where on the margin, where it was possible to make certain investments, I think those are very wise investments that the railway minister has identified, whether they have to do with adding capacity on congested routes, whether they have to do with passenger convenience, and most importantly, whether they have to do with safety. So wherever it makes sense to do these high return investments, that's where you will find that we will spend the money.
I want to talk to you about two big developments that have happened in the very brief tenure of the government so far. One is on the whole disinvestment piece. One of the first things the government did was to actually tell SEBI that we are taking away whatever earlier concerns we had about bringing PSUs at a par with private companies in terms of their public shareholding. And therefore, we are going to see a spate of issuances over the next 3 years. On the other hand, your manifesto talked about FDI in a fairly detailed manner, but in less than 2 months or just a little over a month, we've already seen cabinet notes having been circulated and very close to decision making. Do you believe these are the two big revenue generators that this government is going to work towards?
Well, FDI, Vivek, of course, will not be a revenue generator as such for the government. I think where FDI is going to be extremely important is in triggering private investment, boosting infrastructure assets, boosting construction as a result of that, and so on. So I think it's very important for us to get the private investment cycle going, and that's where FDI is so important, and that's why the government is pushing FDI as much as it is. So I think that is a very wise step, and there's a lot of action, as you pointed out, on that already. Now, coming to the PSU side and the resources that it does free up if indeed we are able to issue those on the capital markets, on the stock market. Again, this is where the virtuous cycle that we can unlock becomes so important, because if indeed there is a sentiment change, if indeed, as I said earlier, the policy roadmap is reassuring to investors, the markets take off. The markets are very bullish. Once the markets are bullish, then you can actually go off and sell some of these PSU stakes, and that frees up more resources, which naturally means you can invest more in high quality capital projects and so on, and therefore that stimulates growth. That obviously means that the markets go up as well. So it's really a question of how we get that flywheel spinning, how we get the virtuous cycle going again of investment and growth. And I think again, FDI, PSU stakes, investment both from domestic and foreign institutional investors, those are the mechanisms by which we can get the economy on a fast growth trajectory.
All right, we leave it there. Thank you very much, Jayant Sinha, like always, for coming by and talking to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek.